We good?
Good on air?
Okay. Can we get the roll call?
Commissioner Pitts?
Sure.
Commissioner McKinley?
Yes.
Commissioner Hilton?
Here.
Commissioner Bailey?
Here.
Commissioner Dawson?
Here.
Sorry.
All right. Okay. Everybody in their packet has the May 10th, 2021 meeting, the minutes for that meeting. Any changes, additions?
There's a couple of typos. Let's see if I can find them. According to the minutes here, Commissioner Dawson was both present and absent, so I think he was absent. So presence needs to be struck. That's on page 1 under
Yep.
roll call. And then on page 3, under tiny home ordinance, there's just, says tiny homes. Vice Chair Beatty stated we only need to focus on a couple of items, blah, 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 which is what is a tiny home, should be tiny home. Other than that, I'll make a motion to approve the minutes.
Okay, do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, so item number 3 is old business, Cahabashal subdivision, the final plat. I believe we have both information that was provided here today, as well as the plat that you provided in advance. You guys had time to look at,
And this is a public, there will be a public hearing.
still a public hearing. Do we need to reopen that? No,
No.
I think it's
This
still.
is a new
it's
public hearing for final.
For
plat.
final plat, right, okay. Okay, so we will open the public hearing now. Who do we have here? Thanks. Okay, so Chase Fallon, if you can just state your name and address, if you want to provide any information.
Yeah, I'm Chase Fallon, 276 Davis Lake Road. There's probably only a couple of points I think I'll address that we discussed in the preliminary plating issues. One of which was, there was concern about cul-de-sac and turnarounds. As you notice in the final plat you've got here, we've addressed the cul-de-sac and the ability to turn around any emergency vehicles, or I think there was some concern about school buses, but ultimately you can turn around large vehicles now in the case of need of an emergency vehicle needs to turn around there. Those were vetted out by EMC Engineering and some 3D CAD software to verify before we went through the build-out process. There was no major changes between preliminary plat and final plat to the actual layout of the property. The only thing that did change is lot 12A increased in size from 7.489 acres to 10.595 acres. That was basically just to offset a flip issue that we ran into from a conservation standpoint, so really no major change there. In your packet that I provided you, or what I provided today, there's a road maintenance plan and an emergency plan that we'll put in place that we will distribute to fire rescue, sheriff's department, emergency management, so they can get in and out of the property anytime that they'll need to. I believe that's all, unless you've got, or if anyone has any questions for me.
Any questions that you guys have? Okay.
Let's make a stupid question. The 2A and 2B, 3A, 3B, is that all one lot?
Yes, sir.
So that's just,
It's, so because we have to put an actual road in, we can't do a deeded access point. The lots just, they're continuous, the road just flows through the lot.
so there's no intention to divide
They
those?
cannot be divided. It's within the covenants that you got, that those lots, just 2A and 2B, anything that's A and B stay
It's
permanent.
specified in the covenants.
That's right.
Okay, I read the comments. I glanced over them.
Any other questions? Okay. Then we will close the public hearing if we can get your report.
Very good. Just to summarize, you'll recall that the owner is Cahaba Shoals LLC, is a gated community, no public access. The location is off of Roland Road, southeast of Woodland Road, State Road 36. The zoning is AR, total acreage 226.54 acres, 13 lots. The smallest lot's around 5 acres, the largest one approximately 48 acres. The private road is proposed, as you had approved at the preliminary plat stage. The surface will be asphalt millings, at least this first round. And it's estimated they're about 815 feet plus of Flint River frontage. This isn't the, if you look at your plan, you'll see this isn't the exact aerial. We've actually acquired some property, and I think maybe even sold some property. But at least when you look up on the tax assessor's website, this is what we'll call the base lot, and then some of the property that takes us out to Roland Road has been added to the lot here. If you need any clarification, this is just not an accurate depiction of the lot, but at least it gives you a general idea where it is along the river. And here you see 36 Woodland Road. All right, and this is the reason why you have paper copies up there, because there's no way you would be able to read anything on this overhead, but thank you to Mr. Fallon for getting this to me so we could put it into your presentation. But this is the updated plat, proposed plat, final plat for this subdivision. All right, going through my staff report. A number of the things that I touched on as still needed were touched on in the very first staff report. I'll also go over here some of the things that have been accomplished just to refresh your memory. Waivers were granted, number one, for the private road, especially for not to be built to the standards in your subdivision ordinance. That was approved. The dead-end street is far longer than the code allows, but you gave a waiver for that. And the modified cul-de-sac design, as you can see in my staff report, I'm still not clear what that design is, even looking at the plat. Maybe you'll be more understanding of what exactly it is, but I still think, at least when I looked at the plat, had some questions about what exactly the design for, and it's not a cul-de-sac, it's something else, but what that is, I guess we can address later. In terms of the prior approvals, the subdivision name has already been approved, and the Cahaba Shoals Drive has been approved. Tonight we'll ask you to approve that second road. You recall that the proposed name for that shorter road conflicted. It was too close to another one, so they proposed a new name. All right. And then we have the submittal that you just received at the meeting tonight, so this gets into some of the things that I felt were missing. Number 4 here in this review, provide the covenants to be recorded. Obviously, we don't have a recorded copy, but you've seen the draft, and as Sam said, you've at least had time to quickly look over and scan it. Whether you feel that's adequate time or not is up to you, but at least you do have the proposed covenants now. What we will ask, number 5 here, is the proposed name for that shorter road is White Oak Way. Those names have to be approved. I did a search on the tax assessor's website, and I didn't find anything close to that name, so that's certainly a satisfactory proposed name. Again, the cul-de-sac, I don't quite understand the design as I see on the plat. It sort of looks like a fork, I guess. I'm not quite sure. It's certainly not a bulb, but it's not a circle in the traditional cul-de-sac, so I would actually prefer to see on the plat the design to show a little graphic of how that's designed. Let remind you, this is your last shot. After this, there's no more shots, unless they want to amend the plan. Private road has no inspections. There's no such thing as a building permit for the private road. So whatever they do on their own with no inspections. Really, the only inspections would be through our office, any building structures, and then, of course, through the public health department, septic tank and wells. But in terms of the design of this is your shot. So if there's any questions in your mind that you don't think are resolved tonight, then they need to be resolved, especially if you're going to approve this tonight. We now have the road maintenance plan. You can see that in the proposal, if you feel that's satisfactory. Some of these other comments will be taken care of in their due time. I just thought it was important to raise the issues so that if something happens in the future and these weren't addressed, you can point to the fact that, yeah, we mentioned this back then, and for some reason it was either done differently or not done at all. And you also have an emergency access plan proposed there. I would have preferred to see a letter from at least 2 or 3 of the providers, but if you feel that what you've got is adequate, that's fine. And that concludes the staff report, Madam Chair.
Okay. Any questions for concerns we have based on these? Good. Okay. All right, so I guess the first thing that we need to do is, in regards to the street name, do I have a motion to accept the proposed White Oak Way for the new name of the road that was formerly proposed as Rocky Creek Trail?
I'll make a motion.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Okay, so if we go back to the concerns Mr. Courier had, I think the biggest one right now is item number 6, the cul-de-sac. Am I correct in saying that?
In my opinion.
Yeah. Do we have any input on that as far as what we'd like to see, any changes, or not changes, but more detail on what that is? I agree, it's hard to tell on here. I'm not saying that it's not adequate, it's just hard to tell whether it is or it isn't. And again, this is kind of our last opportunity to make sure that.
What is the intended design for the turnaround? I mean, is it an open area? Is it gonna be a lane that you pull in one and back up into the other, or?
Laid out on the plat, that's basically what it is. It gives you the ability to pull into a spot, back up, turn around, and go forward. Essentially like if you were backing into somebody's driveway, but it prevents having you back into somebody's driveway specifically.
Okay.
It's
But
basically a side-by-side lane where you can pull in one, then
That's it.
back it in the other one.
But
I mean, these are privately maintained roads, it's not our road to deal with, right?
No, but the design is, it's got to meet some design.
Oh, I know.
Yeah, so,
So that, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off,
no,
but
it's fine.
basically, the one place in here is White Oak Way.
those two technically, at the end of Cahaba Shoals
Or
Drive.
at the very end.
But if I may, 2 things. You know, when we left here last time, kind of what we discussed as far as the private road and some of the variances or waivers we asked for was to keep it as natural as possible. So if we go in there and put a full round cul-de-sac one, it would take a good bit more clearing and a pretty large amount of dirt moving to accommodate this on some of the grades that we're working with within the community. So we try to look at alternative ways to design this so that we mitigated the amount of land disturbance and was still provided with the ability to turn around for larger vehicles.
Those turnarounds are gonna be paved just like,
They'll be milled just like everything else.
with
is
those
just-
millings.
It's
Are
a
they
common
gonna be
design.
marked in any way, or,
What do you mean, Mark? I don't know.
well, depending on how fast you get the subdivision, I could see them overgrowing.
Oh, I
So-
mean, well, it's so, I mean, kind of the way that everything is laid out for the process, I mean, the road work is done with the exception of putting asphalt millings down. So as soon as we get the asphalt millings down, everything will be grassed and then all the right of ways will be maintained.
Okay. That's part of the maintenance plan.
That's outside of the road maintenance plan. We'll have to maintain the common areas through a mowing process.
This,
That'll all be covered within the community.
this is a standard type of turnaround. It's not a special design. Maybe it's not a cul-de-sac, but is this a common, I don't know.
I don't have an answer for you there. Just when I left here and went back to the engineering firm and said, here's what we need to accomplish, they looked at it with on topo maps and said, okay, here's what makes the most sense with the terrain that we're working with. And they showed, 3D models of like, fire trucks and, emergency vehicles turning around within those.
What's the topography at the turnarounds? Is there a slope or?
Well, currently, if you get outside the road basin at the end of Cahaba Shoals Drive, it's probably a 2-to-1. So 2 foot, you're probably talking about an incline about like that.
Okay.
So to make it a full turnaround cul-de-sac work would take a pretty large dirt moving project, even further than what we've already been through. Now, it's not quite as extreme on the end of White Oak Way, but you're dealing with 2 different slopes there. You're dealing with a slope back towards the river and a slope, there's a creek at the, on lot 1. So it slopes towards lot 1.
So Doug, there's no inspection of this private roadway once it's constructed?
No.
So basically, it would be up to the property owners or, I guess, a property owner association to make demands on the developer to make improvements if they're unsatisfied with the turnaround. I assume that, I guess I'm just looking at the slope, for, that further complicates a turnaround for an emergency vehicle, a fire truck or whatever, on a, well, I guess 2-to-1 would be almost a 30-degree,
Pretty steep,
pretty steep, yeah.
but that's the purpose of
I
working
can
with
see
it.
a lot of gravel being slung to,
Well, that won't be a problem because of the way the road base is built.
yeah. Okay.
But there's also no definitive definition of what a cul-de-sac is supposed to be per.
Yeah. Okay. How wide are these turnaround lanes gonna be?
But you got a 12-foot surface, so your road, where your ability, their lanes to back into would be 12 foot wide.
Okay.
By the time they head out, you'll have a pretty substantial area there to turn
And how
around.
deep are they gonna be?
Off the top of my head, I don't know without pulling the measurements on the plat.
Okay.
So are you going to, in your restrictive covenants, you talk about RVs. Any RV remaining on a track for more than 30 days must have an environmental health department approved septic system. So are you going to allow people to live in that?
Well, your
That's,
code will supersede anything of my covenants.
Yeah. Yeah, you may wanna look at that, because
Yeah.
it's not permitted.
Well, that's what I'm saying, like, even if it's in my covenants that they're allowed to live in there, the county code prevents that from happening.
Yeah.
So why would you allow a septic system for it?
Because I don't want somebody to dump it on the ground, and if they're gonna be down there, I'd rather them have have the ability to put a septic system in it and drain it on site into an approved septic system. Plus, when they leave there, most people that, I mean, if we're being honest, if somebody drags a camper down for the weekend, where are they gonna drain it at when they leave there? So I'd rather have them dispose of their waste in a proper fashion.
Yeah.
And by requiring them to have an approved safety system, it prevents having 55-gallon drums buried underground or any other, shortcut type way that somebody might get by without having to have something approved.
Who developed your covenants?
I work with Mallory Trice, Upson Newspaper, Trice Davis.
Okay. Well, in terms of the language on that particular thing, you may want to mirror the ordinance. And just, I think the ordinance,
As far as
14 days. or
amount of time,
something, isn't it?
yeah.
That they can live
Depends
in.
on the
some-
use.
Yeah, exactly. Depends on where it's at and what's going on.
That they can live in it or that it can stay on site.
Well, Madam Chair, if I may answer.
Sure,
In terms of storage on the site, it can be stored
yeah.
for eternity. But in terms of habited in any way, shape, or form, it depends. For instance, if it's Uncle Sam visiting from Arizona, number one, it's got to be tagged from outside of Upson County, and it can sit there for, I think, up to 2 weeks. There's a number of weeks, and it can even be in the front yard. But now when you talk about, for instance, during construction of the home, all right, well, now you're allowed to be there, depending on what this board says in the Board of Commissioners, maybe a year, and the ordinance says no more than 2 years. So in theory, you could have an RV there for 2 years while your mansion is being constructed.
Right.
So it depends.
And I guess, so part of my focus was not necessarily on keeping someone from staying in it for 2 weekends if they want to do that, because y'all's code addresses how long they can stay in it. My concern was, I don't want somebody to bring a camper down here and leave it sitting outside for 2 years, even if it is tagged and titled accordingly.
Right.
So by having anything that sits over 30 days, it's got to stay in a completely enclosed structure. I'm more concerned about the overall look and appearance within inside the community by addressing that point. It's kind of what our thought process was.
Well, the ordinance addresses that as well. But I don't know, as far as living in an RV, is there an exception for a private piece of property? Or, I mean, I think the RV, I don't know that you can live in it down there, to be honest with you, or even camp, unless it's somehow permitted to do so. Of course, then it's all up to the hue and the cry, somebody complaining on a private piece of property, probably not gonna happen. Just saying, you may wanna, in terms of the language in this thing, you may wanna look at the ordinance.
You may want to reference that ordinance that it has
Yeah.
to, so that you don't have to worry about what that is, you're covered in that. Whatever the situation is, if the ordinance applies, then you're homeowner.
Okay.
I didn't read this verbatim, but is there language in there in terms of enforcement of these restrictions?
It'll all, so yes and no, it won't be attached to what you have there. Language will be attached to the association as applies to. But it'll all be handled with them, I mean, unless it's a code enforcement issue, which then, gets reverted back to the county.
Going back to the cul-de-sac thing, maybe it's a language situation that we're dealing with more than a design, because there are turnarounds and there are cul-de-sacs and there are hammerhead turnarounds that are for ends of streets. There are different designs. Maybe it's more of a instead of that's the language of cul-de-sac, maybe it's a turnaround area that's for that design, because there are different designs that fall under that. If I did a search for layouts and designs for cul-de-sacs, and you see different ones, and one's called a hammerhead, different types here that take care of the situation for vehicles to turn around at the end of the streets. Maybe it's more of a terminology in it, instead of it saying a cul-de-sac, it's a turnaround at the end of, at the end of the street. It's more of a situation. But there are different types of designs that fit up under that, but they're not called cul-de-sacs, but they are called hammerhead turnarounds and things like that. So maybe we're talking about more of a language situation than we are that if we're approving it. And you wouldn't necessarily call what he's got a cul-de-sac. It's a turnaround, and there are legitimate designs, but I just pulled up on the internet here.
Okay. Anything else? Yep. Based on the restrictive covenants, the road maintenance plan, the emergency management plan, as well as the information that Mr. Courier supplied, we'll have a motion of what we would like to see, specifically what we would like to see more detail on, what we would like to see changed, or what we're approving. That was a lot. Or you can break it down, what you like, what you don't like, what you want and don't want.
Well, I'm okay with the turnaround design. I mean, I'm certain that whatever goes on the ground will be sufficient. What I'm not completely comfortable with is the enforcement of this thing, and I don't know that that's necessarily something, I think I would have liked to have seen a little more descriptive document, but this is what you're going with, so we just need to decide
You're talking
whether or
about
not that's sufficient.
you're talking about the covenants?
Yeah.
That would fall outside of our scope.
Well, it does, but at this point,
So-
in terms of the overall approval of the subdivision, I would have,
So basically on that last page, if I'm reading this right, is the property owners, if a property owner does something that goes against the covenants, the homeowners association is not going to fight that battle. It's going to be the other property owners.
Well, that'll be the homeowners association that'll be responsible to handle the issues within the communities.
Okay.
I guess what I was looking for was some language regarding how the homeowners association would be constructed, how it would operate, its enforcement authority, how does, a property owner redress an issue with his neighbor through the homeowners association. I think you're still filling that out a little bit.
I mean, yes and no. I mean, to be fair, it wasn't asked for. All that was requested with the final plat was the covenants and the pieces that Mr. Courier laid out. So I didn't think that all that detail was technically relevant to, I understand your concern. How is this gonna be handled and mitigated so there's no problems that come back and lay it back on y'all's desk later on.
Right.
But
Well, and again, that's really germane, I don't know if that's germane to this board. That would be within the homeowners association and the developer, how all that transpires. All right, could you give a recommendation, approve or disapprove?
I think that we need to be satisfied that the issues that I raised have been answered to your satisfaction.
Okay.
If they have been, for instance, I recognize that there are legitimate designs, but we don't have that design. If it's a hammerhead, where is that hammerhead design on the plat? If it's one of the other ones, why isn't that design on the plat? If you look at, like I said, to me, what's on the plat looks like a three-fingered thing that I'm not quite
Yeah,
sure
it
what
looks
it
like
looks
a
like.
turkey foot,
So
bird foot.
I would expect that to be on there. And again, this is your last shot at the design. Basically, if you say, whatever you do will probably be fine, whatever they do is gonna be fine.
Right. So other than that, or did you have another?
Well, in terms of the issues, I think there is a delicate balance in terms of the covenants. I think that in terms of how it operates, I think you're hitting what it says and what the content is probably not our concern, but how it functions and how it's going to mitigate problems, because yes, if the homeowners association doesn't care of the problem, it'll be my office, or it'll be the county administrator's office that gets these complaints. And to some degree, we say it's a private matter, it's your covenants, and that does happen occasionally, where we just say, as a matter of fact, one of your brand new subdivisions, we had somebody call and was upset that the owner's minimum house size was larger than what the county's was. We said, sorry, but you bought that piece of property, those were the covenants, so we're not gonna enforce it. But she was already unhappy with the higher minimum than what the county had. So do we get complaints from people who are subject to covenants? Yes, we do. Then that's not the first one, and it won't be the last one.
Right.
So we do want to look at, I think it's legitimate, if you don't feel that the covenants function properly, that there's not the give and take, or the balance, or the enforcement process that you're comfortable with, because if for no other reason, we want to keep as many of those issues away from our own staff and our own function, because they need to understand that's a private contract, it's a private covenant, we don't have anything to do with that. But if the mechanism to enforce that, or to create it, or amend it, or whatever it happens to be, I think those are some legitimate concerns. So it just depends on what part of those, any individual. Well, I think it's legitimate that if you think something invites violation of our own ordinances or encourages it, that's certainly a thing to discuss. And now, whether that's enough to say we're not going to approve the subdivision, that's a whole nother, you got to weigh everything.
So you kind of started out, do you want
to make a motion?
to try that again, or make a motion, or,
Well,
I mean,
I'm not concerned about the turnaround as much as I am concerned about the covenant and the structure of it, and the invitation of a violation of a county ordinance. So I would like to see a review on that. So what I would make a motion is that we table that until, this is prepared by an attorney, to me, it's probably boilerplate language, if you understand what I'm saying, regarding the protective covenants, which should be, for an attorney's office, pretty easy to generate, and meet this commission's satisfaction in regard to that. Also, I would like to see that the whole issue of the RV use mirror the county ordinance. So I would invite them to look at that ordinance and address the language there to meet the ordinance. Other than that, perfectly satisfied with everything else. So, I'm not, my motion would be to table this and let him have one more shot at the covenants. To try to satisfy at least me, but I don't know what my other board members think, or commission members.
Only real thing I see is the one on the RVs, that it doesn't, you know, that it doesn't say that you gotta fall back to the county ordinances on that one, in that language. The rest of the stuff, oh, it is on there. Oh, no, it isn't, okay. Yeah, that's the, that one thing is on main road. I think your deal about them not dumping it on the ground, that's a great thing that you got that in there. Just that the language shows that it's, you know, that they've got to comply with all the county ordinances as far as that,
Chase, is your road maintenance plan going to be part of your,
So the road maintenance plan will fall under, the homeowners association fees and so forth. It'll be set in with the homeowners association.
but the guidelines that you've got on here, is that going to be tied to this so that any person buying a lot or selling a home in the future, they fully understand what they're signing up for in terms of roads?
Yes, there will be something that will identify them that they're gonna pay an annual HOA fee, and here's what the annual HOA fee will include, because there are other things outside of just road maintenance that these will
Right.
include.
Okay, so it'll be included in that. Okay. Anybody want to take a stab at a motion?
I would approve it with the one amendment on the RV thing, that it would tie to our ordinances, our county ordinances would be spelled out in there.
For the RV?
Yeah, for the RVs. It would match up and match up to at least or supersede our county ordinances for the RVs. That's the only thing I really.
Everything else is approved, you're approving everything else?
Yeah, I'm okay.
That's all right. Do I have a second on that?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
5-0, Madam Chair? All right, based on the direction, then I guess what we would expect is in the recorded covenants to see some reference to your RV regulations. And if we don't see any recorded covenants, that reference will bring it back to your attention.
Correct.
Ask one question. Do I need to reference the entirety of the code, not just specific to campers, but do I need to have something that reverts back to anything that the county puts in place that supersedes what the covenants say, or you just want me to focus on campers here?
Well, I would be hesitant to answer that question. You may want to speak to your attorney about it. I understand. Well, I'm assuming this is going to change based on tonight's meeting. I mean, is this a final document?
Well, the front page is just something that I provided to y'all.
Right.
The covenants themselves, yes.
This is a final document?
I mean, short of, it would actually be recorded once we record plats. And, but I guess my question is I don't wanna just address campers and come back here in the next meeting and we say, well, I just don't want there to be any gray area. I wanna minimize the.
Again, I hesitate to answer that question. I would think that might be something you want to address with your attorney.
I mean, I think if you're on the safe side, then the ordinance is the ordinance. You address the ordinance,
Yeah.
not just RVs,
But
but
uh,
you,
I think that if you present and that's just me spitballing here, you know, as your friend, if you present this to a brand new property owner, and then they find out, well, the county ordinance prohibits that, well, he said I could do it, you know, and then now you got a irritated property owner. It might be something you just want to clean up your language to make sure that everybody understands what the rules are. And you understand what the rules are, you know, in terms of RV.
And I don't know
Or
that you
anything
have to
else.
get into the specifics in that, or other than
Yeah.
referring them back to the county ordinance.
County ordinance.
So that it's not on you or the homeowners association to spell that out and to interpret that for them.
Yeah. But then again, I mean, everybody is required to have some knowledge of the law, what's legal and what's illegal. But to answer your question, there may be some reference to, you know, that this document is superseded by any county ordinance or state law and state law. You know?
See, I mean, you already got it, it's gonna be in a permanent enclosed structure that's, really is beyond what we would require just for have a camper on your you know, to have your camper sit on your property until you're ready to go camping again.
Yeah.
So that, you're above what's required, it's just spelling out that, you know, make sure this has gotta match what the county says. It's simple.
You may want to look at that ordinance.
What's it?
I had a copy of it.
What's it say, a kiss?
And any other, I mean, you know, county ordinance that might somehow affect what you got going on down there. But
Okay?
So just to conclude, Madam Chair, you got approval of your subdivision. The only thing I would ask is, of course, once the subdivision is recorded, I would need a copy of the actual plat itself. And then anything that else is recorded along with it, including those covenants. And based on this, I'll just look to see there's some reference to at least the RV portion of the county ordinances that, you know, whatever they do are consistent with that. And that, you know, then we'll just decide it's consistent with what they said. Now, the only thing I'm gonna look for is RV language. Now, sort of like Sam said, if your attorney feels like you should go broader than that, but the discussion here was specifically about RVs. We have very specific ordinances about RVs. So that's what I would be looking for to make sure that you comply with the motion that was just approved.
Just to be clear, I can move forward with final plating and recording. I don't need to come back here for a second meeting about this. I just need to get you proof that we have addressed the RV.
I just need a copy of those recorded covenants, and they either do reference the RV requirements or they don't.
Okay.
But yes, build, sell.
Okay, I'd like to move B and C behind item number 4, if we can.
make a motion.
Second.
All in favor? Moving to new business, we have an application for special exception, SPX 2021-05, Sydney R. Long and Matthew R. Long, 968 Windsweet Farm Road, parcel 070042, AR for a kennel of a commercial nature. We'd like to open the public hearing. We've got 3 people here. Sydney Young and Matthew. Okay. Do both of you want to talk? One of you want to talk? Do you have anything for the public hearing? Anything to add that we need to know? No? Okay. Then we have Marlene Gibbs here. Do you have anything that you'd like to?
Yes.
Okay, okay.
Do I need to stand?
if you just give your name and address.
I'm Marlene Gibbs, 840 Windsweet Farm Road. I'm the neighbors, and I think the kennel will affect the noise where I live. We've lived there since 2006, and it's very quiet right now, and I don't know how you could control 16 dogs barking. You know, the sound. So the lady that owned that property prior to them purchasing it in December, she had it clear cutted. So now I can even hear when they talk next door at my house. I don't know if they can hear me, but I can hear them when they talk. So I know that we would hear the dogs, and I think it would affect the value of my property, personally. And I don't know that the noise, I mean, I guess my concern is if all the dogs are barking, what do you do? Who do you call? You know, I mean, that's my concern. Because it's so peaceful now, I hear the birds singing and nothing else, you know. And we moved out there in the country for the quiet. But the way the properties are, is we each have, they have 34 acres, I have 29, but the lots are like narrow. So my house, the way that it was built, is like only 210 feet from the property line next to their property. So, yeah, I just think it would be, the level of noise would be, could not be controlled. And I personally don't know who you call if something happens and all the dogs bark. I don't have a problem with dogs, I like dogs, but I just know how kennels are because I have another friend that has a kennel. And it's hard to control that.
So if you're looking at the road at their property,
Right.
which direction is your house? To the left or to the right of that?
You're right.
To the right, okay.
But the way that the house is on that property, on my property, it sits closer
To
to
the
that
property.
side than, you know, in the middle, I guess, of the property.
Okay. Okay. Any questions for Ms. Gibbs?
And, I mean, would anybody want to live next door to a kennel in here? I mean, that's another question. To where you walk out the door and hear dogs barking all the time.
What's the width of your lot?
My lot is, I think it's
What's the
700.
road width?
I think the road frontage,
Yeah,
I think it's 700 feet.
700 feet. What's your road frontage?
I think it's close to 1,700.
Well, it might be longer, I don't know. I'm thinking, I mean, if you look at the plat, I don't know if you know the plat.
I mean, these lots look pretty wide.
They are wide, but my house is on that side over there.
Okay.
What would be the estimated distance between where the proposed kennel is and where her house is?
From where the kennel will be to her house would probably be just over 500 feet.
What kind of dogs?
So the plan would be more for like boarding or daycare, those type thing. And the kennel itself, a lot of people, when they hear kennels, they just assume, you know, fencing. It will actually be enclosed. It will be a portable, prefabricated building, and the dogs will actually remain in there until designated let-out times throughout the day. But they would actually be kept indoors through the night, through the day, and just have designated times throughout the day when they get to go out in the yard and exercise, use the restroom, those things.
So, okay, this is a commercial venture,
Yes,
and it's for profit.
yes, correct.
All right, can you describe what you envision as a business?
As in functionality or?
Well, as in intent, as in, what you wanna do out there?
Yeah,
How big is this building? How many dogs do you
sure,
wanna
sure.
look after? How, you know, or, I mean, is it doggy daycare or is it, I go on vacation and I can take my dog out there and you're
Right.
gonna look after it while I'm in Florida for a week?
Correct.
What's your business plan?
Okay, the building that we're currently looking at is a 16 wide by 50 long. It would have a small office type space, drop off type space in the front. And then through the remainder of the back area have kennels on each side. And the intent would be for daycare, if somebody works long hours or, you know, whatever, their dog generally stays at home in a crate or something like that. It would be for daycare purposes, or like you referenced, if you go on vacation and need a place for your animals to stay, your dogs to stay.
So this is not for breeding
No,
pit bulls
no.
or beagles?
I'm very involved in rescue, so
Okay.
I'm fully spay neuter. I do not
Some dogs
support.
make more noise than others.
Correct.
And I don't, so, I don't know that I would want to be next to a beagle kennel,
Right.
okay?
No, this would be for any type dogs, any, you know, whatever. It could be anything from a Chihuahua to a Golden Doodle. I mean, you know,
Okay.
those type things.
Yeah.
But it's not it will not be used for rescue purposes.
No, not at all. He wouldn't.
What's the maximum number of dogs at any one time?
We plan to have right now 16 kennels. And so I guess if someone has 2 small dogs, they could, you know, stay in the same kennel, but maximum would be, if 2 were in each kennel, 16 times 2, 30 or 32 would be
If
maximum.
that would be if you had 2 per kennel.
Per kennel at one time, yeah, fully
It's
booked
not
up.
likely.
No, it's
Yeah, which is
very
not, yeah.
So can you add to this, can they add to this kennel at any time?
My plan would be, you know, anybody starting a business would hope that it would grow. And at the point in time where we felt we were having to turn business away due to being full or whatever, we would then look into expanding, which would be off-site,
Right,
purchasing a place or, you know, whatever the case may be.
okay.
So it would never involve this piece of property.
To expand on the property, no.
I mean, your tract is how many acres?
Right at 35.
And
You're
then
going
you
to
would
start
have-
out with
It's not a
16,
small piece of property.
16K.
Yes.
They're all indoor also.
We will have a play
There
yard.
will be a 50 by 100 play yard.
Yeah, but that would be limited time, they would
What
only,
size?
50 by 100 on each side of the building.
Okay.
And is that 200 feet from the property line? the
it would be
play?
about 600 or so.
And it's not good. It's gonna be about 500 feet off the property line.
And if you're boarding dogs, you're not gonna have all 16 dogs out in the yard at one time, because you
No.
have dog fights and everything else, so
Correct.
you're gonna have to, space your time, limit the dogs. If you don't, you're gonna be buying people's, you know,
So
you'll be buying people's dead dogs.
Right,
how does that affect your property though, if you have a commercial place right next door out in a large area, agricultural, where like we grow hay on our property? So what, I mean, really, how does that affect it? When you've got commercial right there and all the traffic on that road?
That's not for this.
How far off the road is your building going to be?
Building be, I would say pretty close, I think it was 800 to 1,000 foot.
Off the road frontage? Is there anything in front of it?
There's,
gro-
where we're putting it there is a bunch of cedar trees. Mature cedar trees around it, surround it.
And then in front of those trees is just a pasture.
Do you have any dogs on the property now?
I do, we have 4.
So you're essentially in a kennel operation now?
No,
Your
those are
personal
our
dogs.
personal dogs.
Okay.
Do you live on that property
Yes.
too? Okay.
Have you looked at what our ordinance, have you looked at our ordinance and what we're looking to try to resolve here tonight? Have you looked at the ordinance? Okay. If I might go through a couple of things that I need some answers for on the information that we have on page 3, Article 3 is a must. It must not constitute a nuisance, hazard because of the number of persons who will attend such a facility, a vehicular movement, noise, fumes generated, or type of physical activity. On page 4 of the document that I'm looking at, first of all, I would like to say that on paragraph B, we need to subtract the last sentence of that paragraph. And also on page 4, there's another part that states that detrimental to adjacent properties or the general neighborhood. The nature of a dog kennel is that it will generate additional traffic, noise, sound due to the concentration of people, traffic movement, and dogs barking. This is located in the center of the owner's property. You saying that you're gonna put it in the center of that property. And also that the nearest home would be approximately, as this lady said, 200 feet west of the owner's home, where your home is located. The other question that I have, you did not give us a real good answer, is the breed of the dogs that you anticipate that you will have on this property at any time. Does that tell me about that? Big dogs, little dogs?
Yes, it would be a variety. If someone called me, I would require, I've looked into the Department of Ag requirements, and you have to make sure that they are vaccinated, etc., before you accept them. So if someone called me about a Chihuahua needing to be kept while they're at the beach, that would be, surely I could be breed specific, but I would say that it would be a variety.
Are there any breeds that you would personally would not keep?
No.
So pit bulls, Doberman pinschers, Rottweilers, they're all,
I mean, as long as the owner, I feel like, if I contacted, I've used boarding facilities before for my dogs, and we have one who doesn't play well with others. And so she, is aware that my dogs only get let out together. And, it would be a questionnaire type thing, prior to accepting the dog.
right. But you would agree that some breeds are more problematic than others?
Oh, for sure. Like I said, I've worked rescue and I've seen it all pretty much.
Have you spoken with your insurance company to see if there would be any restrictions on what dogs? Because I know some insurance companies would only insure you if you owned a pit bull or you owned certain breeds of dogs. They won't even write your homeowner's insurance.
Right. We're gonna it would be a commercial policy, and an umbrella, those type of things, and we would just research companies who would cover all of the above.
Tell me about veterinary practice. Do you have a vet that is gonna follow through with what you folks are gonna do out there?
I personally use Hannah's Mill, but I would just require that whoever I was accepting, that they had current rabies vaccinations. I wouldn't be specific to what veterinarian did it. But I would just ensure that they were, up to date on all vetting.
My vet has to supply, who boards our dog when we go, our vet has to supply that boarder with documentation that all the shots, boarding shots and all those things are up to date before they'll even accept the dog.
Right.
What is your plan for water waste disposal?
Waste disposal will be going through, GF, is it GFL?
Yeah.
GFL will be doing the waste disposal.
I understand that, I read that. What I'm asking is how is that transfer gonna be made? How are you gonna clean that water up? How are you gonna dispose of it? Get it to those folks?
So as far as indoor goes, if a dog is in a kennel and it has an accident, can't hold it until we go outside, whatever the case may be, I would use doggy bags, pick it up, sanitize the area, and mop it up. If it were to be outside, we will have traditionally, kind of like what you see at a dog park, etc., a station with a bucket and bags, things like that, to ensure that the yard is kept clean as well.
What kind of ground cover are you gonna have in your play area?
Yeah, it's a mixture of hay and grass right now, but it will be kept.
Is that sustainable? I don't know, I've never kept.
I can reference my friend who owns a very large scale dog kennel. She's been in operation for 4 years at a much larger scale than I will probably ever be. And her areas are grass. She does implement sand and mulch as needed in certain areas that are lower, etc., but hers has sustained.
Okay.
So that would be a,
So you're building 50 by what, 16?
yeah,
Sounds like a portable building, isn't it?
it is, yes.
All right, what kind of flooring, how is it constructed?
It's gonna be tile floor. It's gonna, basically they come, we're gonna have to build the inside of it out. It's gonna be tile floors, tile up to a certain extent, and the kennels, and that's basically it, and the rest of it will be enclosed. It's gonna be simple, it's not gonna have any running water in the building itself.
Not having
No
what?
running water inside the building. It's gonna be, spigots outside of the building.
Gonna be air conditioned,
Yes, it will be air conditioned.
heated,
Yes. That'll be the only,
sheet rock?
don't know if it's gonna be sheet rock or, bead board, haven't decided.
What do the kennels look like?
Kennels are gonna be wire kennels that she's got in place for this order. They're 6.5 foot tall, enclosed kennels.
So the cages or
Pretty much like cages, yes. And they'll have exit.
commercial,
Exit
Yes.
or
door.
something y'all build?
It's
No,
commercial.
We won't do
So it's not a homemade
it,
No.
chicken
They
coop
have
kennel?
no.
I could have gotten a picture, but they have them at places like Tractor Supply outside.
Right.
They're the coated wired frames.
So
with
what you
the-
gonna do, poop?
Yeah,
I have
It
4
would-
dogs.
yeah,
or
it
3.
would be-
I don't know, I got several.
the waste that was inside the building, I would get up with bags, tie it up, put it in. We're gonna speak with GFL and let them know what the purpose is, and we're not sure if we'll need a standard trash can or if we'll need a small style dumpster. But it would just be disposed into the dumpster and dumped, tied in bags individually.
So it's gonna be going to the landfill.
Yes.
It's not gonna-
Okay. Now, y'all plan on getting the poop up off the ground?
Yes, we would have, much like you see at dog parks and stuff, a station with bucket bags, those type things, and after let outs, I would just go around and
So
clean
in
up.
no means would there be an accumulation of animal waste?
No,
You wouldn't want that with someone dropping their dog off to your place.
Yeah.
That would deter them from wanting
Okay.
their dog.
yeah.
Well, what we look for, what I look for here is, have you thought this through, and do you know what your plan is,
So the building will be, for example, your dogs are in at night. The building will be totally enclosed. There's not an open air for sound to come out of
No,
at night
not
to, okay.
It will
gonna be
have,
insulated?
yes,
Yes.
yes.
It will have dog doors, each kennel will have its own door to the outside. Access to the dogs to come outside and they don't have to interact inside the building.
But those will be closed at night, so they can't go out. They cannot go out to outside unless you let them out.
Correct. And we plan to comply with whatever the county ordinance is as far as noise disturbance time cutoff. We plan on complying with that as far as late evening let out time, not doing a let out past 9:30, 10 o'clock at night.
What do you anticipate the maximum number of dogs on site at one time?
I would say 20 at the most, and that would be, I mean, to me, that would be pretty full.
Do you have an idea of how many you think you would look at for doggy daycare versus overnight boarding?
I kind of feel like the demand for boarding will probably be a little higher than daycare, especially seasonal, holiday time, summertime, spring break, those type things. But probably 75% boarding to 25% daycare.
Well,
Would just be what I would expect. I'm sure it can
you're out on
change.
Windsweet Farm Road, it's not easy to necessarily find Windsweet Farm Road, so I don't
Probably
know
less.
how much commercial traffic.
Boarding, less daycare than that.
I do know some people who do daycare, specifically people who are in nursing, who work 12-hour shifts, those type things, but that would be less likely.
Saying you're not on Main Street,
Right,
so it's not necessarily an easy drive to
just drop off on
drop
the way to
off
work.
a dog for a dog at daytime.
But how do you control the noise? I'm there all day, I just retired. How do you control the noise from 30 dogs or 20 dogs barking? I mean, that's my concern. I don't want to sit on my back porch and listen to dogs bark all day. That's my big concern, because I just retired last year. And I can enjoy being home, I thought. You know, that's my biggest concern.
Is there any buffer between the property?
Very small one.
Not much, and that's the thing, when Miss Madison had it clear cutted, there were a lot of trees, but she had them all cut down on their property, and there's not a big buffer there, you know, and that is my concern right there, is the noise. Because I'm not out at night, I'm out in the day, you know, so.
Well, if the building's insulated in there in the building, other than just coordinated times that you take them out to run, you're not gonna ever be faced with probably 20 dogs out running at one time. I mean, that's, who knows?
Okay, any other questions for the public hearing? Yep. Okay, thank you guys. We'll close the public hearing. If we can get the staff report.
The staff report with the special exceptions for the Sidney R. Long and Matthew R. Young have requested approval to Upson County for the special exceptions for the dog kennel on 30.41 acres at 968 Winch Street Farm Road. So the dog kennel falls up under the special exceptions of basically it's on AR, it's on agricultural residential. The district is listed as 504B11. Kennel of a commercial nature, meeting of the following development standards. All structures must be set back 200 feet from the property lines as permitted use, which may be approved by the special exceptions. The dog kennels, as they state, there will be 16 kennels, 2 per kennel. Maximum dogs would be from 28 to 32. Individual kennel sizes from 4 by 6 to 4 by 8. Smaller kennels and smaller and larger dog kennels. The building the building which would house the dog kennels will be 16 by 50. So right here on the area photos, the map key, the dog kennel is located with the yellow star. It's right in front of the shed. The entrance is the red, this is the main entrance right there, the red bar. Their house is the green star right there, and the driveways are the 3 brown circles. Any kind of traffic issues, they have 2 more driveways they can use. And for a north stand, I think is great, is the trees that border the dog kennel per se. And a rough estimate, I did a mean of the houses from the dog kennels. I came up with about 500 feet. Okay. And these are some photos of the dog kennel locations. Right here we have the path, which you would see right here, the red mark, and the opening as well. They're gonna widen that opening. And this is the place where the kennel will be, in front of the shed. Some more pictures. You see the picture on your right. You see the trees that are going to border the kennel.
And those trees would remain?
Yes.
Yes, there's a couple that will have to come out for the access, for the road to get to it, and all the rest of them will come back.
All right. Any questions?
No.
No?
No.
Okay. Given that, do I have a motion?
Well,
And any specific requirements within that?
I think maybe we should talk about the number of dogs that can be on the site, for one thing, and maybe placing a condition if they ever try to enlarge their facility to have to come back before this board.
You make a recommendation.
Well, let's talk about it.
What that limit is?
Yeah. No. What do you think?
How many,
16 kennels.
16?
Maximum 2 dogs per kennel.
How big are these kennels?
4 by 6 or 4 by 8?
If there's 2 dogs per kennel, it'd be the smaller.
Yeah, smaller breeds.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
And
Well, let's say 30.
realistically, that would be,
Worst case scenario is 32.
32.
yeah, the worst case scenario would be 32,
Well,
but
what is
realistically.
16 and 8?
24.
24. So, I would round it up to 25 and say you can't have more than 25 dogs on site at any one time. I don't know, I'm a dog person, I got a bunch of dogs. So, I'm supporting their endeavor here. I think 30.41 acres is more than anybody could ask for such an adventure. And 700 and something feet of road frontage, minimum of 200 feet to the neighbor, and a bit of tree buffer. I don't necessarily see a problem here. Now, we want to put a limit on there. I would say and again, if we want to. Now, I will say, you don't need 40 dogs out there, or 50, or 150. I would say 25. Sounds like a reasonable balance. And I came to that conclusion with 16 pens, and they said, well, if we have 2 dogs, it's 32. I'm just saying, on average, you know, I got 3 dogs, and they're all 3 different sizes. I got a miniature dachshund, I got a Labrador, and I got some kind of Feist Jack Russell mix. So,
You're
and
saying
then
if
again,
half-
some dogs don't G-haul.
Right.
So I don't know how often you plan on doubling up. And that's why I said, well, at 16 pens, you're probably only gonna double up 8 of them at any one time.
Realistically, you're probably not gonna double up on a dog that's not from the same house, the
Right.
same owner.
Correct. That would never happen.
You wouldn't put 2 people's dogs in one
Yeah.
pen.
So,
You know,
I
that's-
mean, I'm looking at the law of averages. I just don't see every 32 dogs being out there.
I agree.
But if we wanna put a restriction on it, say 25.
Joel, what do you think?
I'm not a dog person, but I have some neighbors who are dog people, and I hear those dogs every day.
Yeah.
I do. It's just, plus, I think the number is the key. I think we may need to reduce that number, just like you said. And I think you need to make sure that you have a vet on site, on charge, on call, for whatever purpose might be. And as I said, I'm not a dog person.
All right, Sam has said 25, what do you say?
I'm not gonna say. I'm not gonna say if you folks go with 25, if you go with 12, it doesn't make any difference to me. It's still a dog kennel.
Yeah.
It's still gonna bark.
Yeah, but I think they can mitigate. They have a plan. They know what their plan is, although it would have been nice for that just to have been up front. This is our plan, this is what we want to do, but we kind of had to needle it out of you. But they do, they've thought this through. And I think they have a plan to mitigate noise or disturbance. I mean, you're not going to be able to eliminate all noise. Noise is a natural thing. I mean, if it's not dogs, it's cows. If it's not cows, it's goats or chickens or whatever. There's going to be, or a horse neighing, there's going to be noise. Now, the question is, at what point does it become a disturbance? And they have a plan to mitigate that. The dogs are going to be let out in small numbers outside, and
How long do you think, if you let out a dog, how long would that dog be, or that group be outside at any one time?
Probably 10 to 20 minutes at the max.
now, if you want to say, the cutoff is 9 p.m., no doggies out after 9.
There's a great deal of difference between a boarding kennel and a neighbor that's got 5 dogs. Because a neighbor that's got 5-yard dogs, he ain't controlling them. And they're gonna bark at the moon, they're gonna bark at the wind blowing the bushes, and or you got a boarding kennel where you're controlling when they're in, when they're out, how many's in, how many's out.
And I've been the recipient of that phone call. Matter of fact, Curtis Crawford is my neighbor. Okay, and believe it or not, he's called me on occasion to ask me to get my lab up. You know, she just does what she does. But again, I don't know that this is gonna be an ongoing thing. If there is a plan to mitigate the noise, and I think they thought that through now, as a commission, that we further restrict that to the number of dogs or the time frame that the dogs are outside and allowed to be outside. I think a reasonable accommodation can be made.
Do I have a motion?
I'm okay with the 2 dogs a kennel, as long as they can keep it at that. I'm okay with it. I just don't want to see more than that.
What
I
number?
don't either.
What's your number?
I
Jared?
want,
He's saying
I'll go
32.
with 32, as long as there's not anything more than that. And if they choose to enlarge their facility,
Right.
they should come back before the board.
Yeah. And that would give you another opportunity to come back and say, you know, they sold y'all a bill of goods, you know, they've got dogs running everywhere and they're barking and they're fighting and they're, you know, whatever. Or you come back and say, well, you know, it really wasn't a problem that I thought it was gonna be. So, I agree with that. We could restrict it at what your current plan is now. And if you ever want to enlarge it or double it or have more dogs than that out there, even your personal dogs are gonna be in that number. No more than 32. Or 30. What do we want to say? 32?
32.
Okay. You ever have more than 32 dogs, have a plan to have more than 32 dogs out there, you gotta come back. I would also,
So that's
recommend
28 through the boarding,
28
plus
to the
your
boarding,
4.
plus your 4 personal dogs.
Right.
Cause you know they're gonna be in that kennel. I mean, what are you gonna do, leave them at the house? No. They're gonna be down there at the kennel.
One that sleeps with him.
I would say 9:30, the dogs have to be kenneled. That's my recommendation. To
I'll second.
approve with those 2 restrictions. No more than
so
30.
motion to approve no more than 32 dogs,
32 dogs,
including your personal,
to include the business owners.
and
And the dogs have to be kenneled
by 9 p.m.,
by
Or-
9:30.
9:30 p.m. Do I have a second?
Got a second.
All in favor?
Aye.
No. 4-1. All right. So this will go, next step will be county commissioners,
Yes.
and that will be, what date will that be on?
Let's see, July 13th.
July 13th?
July 13th.
So that will be the next date that it comes up before the county commissioners, the hearing there.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay? Did you get that? Okay.
You get that as well. You have, I guess she has another opportunity to
Absolutely.
check
Absolutely.
the county commissioners. So if we don't get the final say, we're gonna make a recommendation. Yeah.
Is that it?
That's it. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, continuing on with item 4, B, broadband-related amendments to the comprehensive plan. I believe we have some information that was given to us for that.
Madam Chair, I just asked, there is no public hearing here. There will be a public hearing for the Board of Commissioners, which is required by state law. but this is an amendment to the comprehensive plan relative to the effort to be a broadband or designated a broadband-ready community. And this is one of those steps that we need to follow, is amending the comprehensive plan.
Okay. Any questions on this? Anybody have questions on this?
No. What do we need to do?
You just need to make a motion to
If you'd like to
amend
go through any of this in detail, we even brought a copy of the comprehensive plan so that you can see where these policies, goal statements, et cetera, would fit into the current plan. If you wanted to go over the individual language, we could do that. We've got the background, the broadband-ready community, and then where this came about, and the grant program, that information is there. So everything that's in your staff report, the written report, we can go through. Or if you just have digested it well enough, you understand, and want to make a recommendation one way or the other to the board of commissioners, you can do that.
Well, first of all, are we saying we're a broadband-ready community, or are we saying we want to be a broadband-ready community?
This would be one of the steps to request
to
it.
request that.
'Cause based on my internet speed, we're not a broadband-ready community. Okay, I got 12
Still
minutes.
doing dial-up?
Basically, you've got mail. We're not ready, so, but if we want to say we're ready for some grant funding or whatever, I'm good with it.
So is that your motion?
That's my motion. I make a motion that we, do what's necessary to incorporate this into because this is a plan, this is, my understanding of the comprehensive plan. It's kind of like planning is forward-thinking, forward-looking, and perhaps we can get broadband ready. And, if we're indicating we want to, then I'm all for that.
Any other questions?
I don't have any.
All right. So we have a motion to approve adding it.
Yes.
Second.
All in favor?
Uh,
Unanimous, thank you.
All right.
Did you hear that wind stream?
That's the problem.
I know, but I'm
He's stuck.
I'm stuck. It is what it is, buddy.
Okay, so this takes us back to item 3B, the gateway ordinance. I know you guys, I missed the workshop, but we have the draft, post-workshop draft. Here, just looking at this, it looks like what we've got that's bolded, is that what you guys had?
Well, the red language
Or-
is what's from your last planning
Was
commission meeting.
The workshop?
Yeah.
Okay, all right, not the flag one, but the red one, okay. Got it.
Right, the only thing in the presentation where they're highlighted would be, I did listen to your
Landscape.
meeting again, and those are the changes that I could glean from what the discussion was.
Right. Any changes, additions, comments? And what you see here, based on the
No,
discussion?
I'm good with what we got. I don't see a whole lot of difference between the requirements for residential property, commercial property, and then commercial lots with less than 100 feet of frontage. So, where do you draw the difference there, Doug? I mean, is there with less than 100 feet of frontage,
Well, the intent in this was very clear in the meeting that the smaller frontage was supposed to be identical to residential. That was stated during the meeting. So that's the language for residential, and less than 100 is identical.
Okay.
In terms of the commercial, you must have a combination of all three of the groups,
Right.
whereas the residential, one or more.
Right.
So you have a smaller obligation if you're residential,
Okay.
or if you're the commercial
Smaller.
under 100.
Okay.
I vote we approve the new draft.
Yeah.
So what we had talked about before was getting to a point to where we approved a draft, and before we moved any further, sending this to county commissioners to review, to see if, one, we were somewhat in line with what their thoughts were on this. Are we still in agreement that?
Yeah.
That's what I was saying, I'll approve this and
Right.
go to that.
Just go to the county for review
Yeah,
only.
yeah, review this, and if we're on the same page.
Joel, you good with it?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Do we need to vote on that?
I think consensus is obvious that this is a trial balloon. Send it to the administration and the commissioners,
See
and
if it flies.
right, see if you're going in the right direction or not, or if they've got something they want strengthened or enlarged, they can tell us that.
I would ask one more thing. I'm not, unless somebody can convince me otherwise, anybody have a problem if we send this to Kyle Fletcher?
I
And get
don't.
her opinion?
I don't have a problem.
Her job's to bring industry into the county. It would be interesting to see what her take on this is. How she views this. Just from a positioning standpoint.
However, it may be better to send it to her with a finished draft after the commissioners.
That's that's what I'm asking, what,
Well, if we're looking for input.
I'm just thinking if we get input and we
It's-
get it input
it's-
from all different places.
It's a working document, we would send it to the IDA as well, just a courtesy, for their input. I mean, they may have a good idea that we're just not thinking
Right.
about.
And that's kind of where I was going with, The more heads that look at it.
Yeah, the more the merrier. What do you think about that, Doug?
I think with trial balloon, it can, anybody, I mean, you don't obligate them to spend time on it, so you might not even get a need.
may
You
not.
get a response.
I'd like to give them the opportunity.
Give them the opportunity.
to
It's a-
give some
it's a
feedback.
It's a working draft, and, this is what we've developed thus far. What are your thoughts? Kind of question, present it to them.
Just a
Well,
couple of points, Madam Chair, on this particular one. You remember that I was sort of trying to tease out of the Planning Commission sort of a threshold where a permit would trigger you having to bring your property up fully to the standard. So arbitrarily, I came up with a permit value of $2,000. Again, I'm not sure that when there's a permit for one window that should necessarily trigger full compliance with the landscape requirements, but that's something I just wanted to draw your attention to. And then also, Commissioner Beatty had some concerns about language related to buffers and screening, and you never really went anywhere with that discussion, but you do have this standards for walls and fences, so that's about as far in that direction as this draft goes. So if you still have concerns about screening, buffers, walls, fences, if you want to beef this up, change it, alter it, this might, again, there was discussion here, but there wasn't any direction for what words might go in there. So we can, and maybe you don't want to do anything on that tonight, that's fine. I just wanted to raise these other issues that, like I said, there was a lot of discussion, but not really any direction. And the same thing with the trash and litter section is, we really had some discussion that didn't go anywhere. Then finally, there were some concerns about how we enforce trash cleanup in that 30-foot buffer. This is the language that's currently in the county ordinances that the code officer uses right now. So it's not like there's no enforcement of debris, accumulation of trash, weeds, etc. There is, and these are the code sections that are part of the, it's called care premises. That's the term that's commonly used in the office, is care premise. And this is the section that we deal with, and we'll cite if there's a complaint about tall grass, weeds, accumulation of garbage, trash, trucks, metal parts, et cetera, et cetera. So it's not that there's no enforcement now, this is the section that's used. And that's it from me, Madam Chair.
The only thing that just to make sure there's some definitive language is missing sections or pieces, talking about walls and fences. Missing sections or pieces shall be replaced. Can we add replaced with like materials? As opposed to you
Or
don't
want
just,
identical material.
or identical materials.
Well, depends on what the material is.
Well, if you invested enough to build it before, you're,
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, there is that individual out there that will just break down a pallet and nail it up somewhere.
Called pallet art.
Yeah. You know, just to have something. So yes, whatever language,
do you want identical materials?
yes, that sounds right.
Okay. That's in.
I think there needs to be, I mean, we're gonna discuss screening at some point, that's fine, we can leave it out for right now, but, and it would be an easy fix, I think, to say, to make some mention of screening, that it needs to be maintained and, be appealing. I don't know of any type of screening that we would forbid necessarily. Most of the screening stuff commercially available is designed to be appealing or attractive. I wouldn't want to see, I would prefer natural buffer, natural vegetation. I like dogs and I like plants. So, but,
I mean, you could add the language that it has to, if it's not natural vegetation, then it has to be commercially designed,
yeah, it needs to be a
Screening.
commercial quality.
commercial grade.
Commercial
screening.
grade screening material, not just, hey,
Right.
somebody broke down a pallet and say, what Chirino's or that place out there is a perfect example of a bad effort for screening. You know, they scrap sheet metal or something that's been put up on a wall. It's not attractive when you go by. I think it's multi-colors. It's roofing material.
Yeah.
It's not attractive to me. It may be to them, I don't know. But fortunately, you drive by it quick enough for it really not to affect the eyesight. I just use that as an example of what we don't want in our gateway corridors.
So do we want to go ahead and add this language in here before we?
Yeah, I think so. At least let the commission know we thought about it. We thought of it. I don't know that it needs to come back to us before it's
Yeah.
published.
So is that language, screening should be a natural vegetation or a commercially,
Commercially available.
commercially graded?
Well, the commercial grade is a
Commercial
different
grade.
thing. Commercially available, you know, a screening product, a commercial screening product. In other words, I guess what we're driving at is it needs to be intended to be screening material. Not just something that somebody ad hoc
Right.
Yeah,
decided to say, hey, you
something
know,
that's eye appealing.
yeah,
Good aesthetics.
yeah. So I think a
Commercial design,
commercially manufactured,
manufactured.
screening material. I mean, they're manufactured and designed by the manufacturer
Yeah. has
to
have
be, appealing
Right.
as something they're thinking of, they
Right.
want it to be attractive.
Right.
And we want it to be attractive.
Right. Doug, would you have enough with that?
I'll
Just-
try.
I mean, I don't think we're trying to get it to rocket science yet, just something for them to give us some feedback.
Yeah.
Okay. Anything else?
No. I think it's a good stab, a good effort.
Yeah, I do too.
Good. All right, good. Guess we're getting somewhere here.
I think we can, the next agenda item is tiny homes, is it not, Madam Chair?
Yes, it is.
I do not want to delay further on tiny homes, okay? The work session was a bust. Me and Joel, I don't know where the rest of you guys were.
It went to my junk mail, so I didn't even know it was here because I wasn't at the last meeting.
I would like to propose this for tiny homes. And this is just me spitballing, but I think some consensus could be had. That tiny homes would be permitted only in two conditions. One, as in a mobile home park. And the second would be a developed subdivision of 10 or more tiny homes.
10 or more.
10 or more.
Why 10 or more?
Why would you say?
I don't know, I'm just throwing that number out there, could say 50, I don't
Just
know.
that it's a tiny home community.
But it's a tiny home community.
I mean, I don't think you have to do any different language other than that. That it would be specified as a
Yeah,
tiny home community.
otherwise, I mean, there's no sense in tiny homes just popping up all over the county, that we wouldn't permit them otherwise. And I think that has been, in other venues, generally how they've, the tiny homes have been kind of kept in communities. And just to, in some ways, to be beneficial to humanity, either veterans or homeless or whatever. So I think it needs, and if it's a subdivision, that means it comes back before this board, and they
Is there a minimum
they have
acreage?
to have a plan.
Is there a
They can't
minimum,
just
is there a
ad hoc.
minimum acreage?
What?
You have any ideas for
You have to do a
minimum acreage?
minimum lot size.
Or lot size,
It
Minimum
would
what
be
it
a
is?
lot,
size, I
considered
don't
lot
know.
size, not
I mean, not,
acreage.
yeah, acreage, but lot size.
Yeah, I don't know, depends on their plan. But it has to be in a subdivision. Now, if you want to propose minimum lot size, or I'll listen to what you have to say. Is there a minimum lot size in a subdivision?
Well, predominantly in unincorporated county, it's an acre because most people have a well and septic, and that's the
Right.
size you need for separation. Otherwise, in areas that are sewered, we don't go any smaller than a half acre.
Okay. In a half acre tiny home community, they're provided they have the sewage and the septic and everything, it could be made to be quite attractive. Especially for folks Joel and my age,
Could you put one
retirement
on?
community or whatever.
So one per
One.
half acre?
That's what I was about to say, can you put one on a half acre? And you said acre? Or a lot size, whatever.
Yeah, I mean, if they meet the other ordinance requirements, I don't see,
Well, that
the
would-
ones that the tiny home communities I've seen, they're kind of nestled,
You know, and that
Uh,
would also be determined by sewer water.
Right.
Yeah, that would be determined, they'd have to have a plan,
Right.
and that's my thing. But otherwise, they're not, the only other place it would be permitted is a mobile home park.
And I think it would.
And that's simply because they sort of fit in.
I think if you're gonna do, if you do mobile home parks, it needs to be in their own section.
I was just about to say,
It doesn't need to
it
be-
doesn't, just like a mobile home park today, the campers
Yeah.
have to be
Don't
in
need
a
You
separate.
got a separate section for campers, you
You
have to have a separate section.
for tiny
The
homes.
area for tiny homes, and tiny homes are homes that are permanent, not on wheels, because if they're on wheels, then there are
RVs.
RVs, so,
Okay.
and it's a permanent,
Essentially.
it's a permanent foundation structure as a tiny home, not, something that's built on wheels to be moved from, location to location.
Okay.
Well, if their problem is the width and length of that, width, especially the width, would not allow that to be transferred, put on the highway. Very probably. What's the maximum width on a manufactured home that can go on the road?
Doesn't matter if we make it on a permanent foundation. We don't have to do, you don't have to do, you don't have to put that in there. If the tiny home is gonna be on a foundation and not gonna be on wheels, as long as it meets the
Well,
setbacks
that's
that we
true,
determine.
that's true, that's what I'm saying, but when you start to do, mix and mingle that into a manufactured home or a travel trailer, then you might get some conflict.
Yeah. And you might get some conflict between, most mobile home parks, they might own the home, but they don't own the land. So,
That's the reason it'd have to be in you have to have
Yeah.
a section designated that you've developed for tiny homes.
yeah.
That just makes a different area to your community that you developed. And these are permanent structures.
Yeah, I'm good with that.
Yeah. If not, we just open up another RV,
That's all right.
another RV.
So Doug, do you think you can
Get
come
too
up with
broad
some?
once you
Yeah.
start doing that.
Well, I think you already have elements of that in the draft
Yeah,
that we started with.
Right.
So we can, if you want to start looking at crafted language again, we can do that. Basically, we haven't gone off center since with this first draft. There really hasn't been a change in language proposal. It's just the type of communities, and I think this original draft sort of talks about that.
Yeah.
both of those were in the original, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, I would like to, I just want to make some progress on it and get it off our
Yeah.
desk.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think that, again, it's kind of like the gateway ordinance. We're coming from scratch from nothing. So if we can get that for the tiny home ordinance, depending on what that looks like, we may do the same thing, pass that along to some of the county commissioners and let them give us some feedback on that.
Yeah,
It's something everybody's talking about, so.
yeah.
Starting from ground zero and coming up, while we're doing this, going through this exercise, I think we're better suited to have more opinions before we put something down hard on paper. I think it will help us, I think it will help the county commissioners as well.
Doug, are you getting a lot of inquiries from tiny home owners?
There haven't been any lately. Like I said, if you gave me a 12-month average, I'd say there's one or two, but if you asked me any in the last 6 months, I'd say not that I've addressed. Now, other staff may have gotten those calls, and we sort of know the answer now, so I may not hear about those inquiries. But
What kind of inquiries do you get? Hey, I want to put up a tiny home, or?
it's normally a single, can I put one on the property, or I'm thinking of buying property, I want to put one up there. There have been a couple of inquiries about creating tiny home communities, not a lot. I think maybe 2 of those calls I've taken, and they haven't been recent.
Yeah.
Basically, we say, not right now, and then we don't hear from them again.
Okay. Well, maybe some entrepreneur will want to develop a tiny home community. I'm not opposed to it necessarily. I think they just like anything else, you need to have a good plan.
Right. Okay, so that's, if we can go forward with that, just kind of incorporating some of that into the base language you've already got. If we move on to item 5, other business, there is none. Item 6, planning commissioner issues and announcements. Does anyone have any?
No.
I don't.
Item 7, Secretary's issues and announcements.
I'll just update you on
Rezoning.
Simonia. You
Yep.
remember that's the rezoning that you had at your last meeting, any warehouses slash retail space. The rezoning was approved, and also in about the same timeframe, the moratorium has now come off. It was not renewed. So I think the original intent to do mini warehouses will be able to go forward. However, you may recall that in the C2, which is now successfully rezoned, that's a special exception. So y'all will be the next ones to hear from that once, and there's no application. Actually, there's been no communications from the applicant since approval of the rezoning by the Board of Commissioners. So the next step is in the applicant's court to file for the special exception and bring it to this body in whatever form that may be in.
Okay, next we have the pending solar energy systems application. We have a company by the name of Solar American Energy. They would like to buy 71 acres for the use for the ground mounted solar energy systems. Approximately 30 acres will be used. The location will be on Rock Bottom Road, and the electric provider will be Georgia Power.
What road?
Rocky Bottom Road.
So backing up to where, basically almost to where the ones are now, at the corner of Racetrack,
Well, they're not that-
36, I mean,
that
not,
close.
but,
Well, basically, we're creating a solar power corridor along 36, which is kind of interesting. Of course, 2 are in the city, and this would be the second one along 36. Now, the original one is back behind McDonald's, so
yeah.
it's not in that corridor. But this will be the second one in the 36 corridor for the county. They haven't submitted their application, but we had a pre-application meeting, and the deadline is next Wednesday.
It should be here today.
This Wednesday.
This Wednesday, yes.
So they have to
16.
submit by this Wednesday for your next meeting, but this was obviously very serious. We had a very lengthy pre-application meeting, so, and they're already tied into Georgia Power.
You said 70 acres?
71 acres, we're gonna use 30 acres.
Well, they're gonna do without 40.
Setbacks and buffers.
What is the landscape? Do you know?
Well, they're mandated to do the half pollinators, and they thought that was wonderful. We don't know what the other half would be. They didn't discuss that.
A good time for somebody to put some beehives out.
And if you want to talk about the windshield survey.
Oh, okay, the windshield survey, right now we're planning to set a date. The dates are between the 23rd and the 25th, which,
And this is for which ordinance?
the ordinance.
So the moratorium, related to the
Related to the
moratorium.
moratorium, yes, sir. We're coming up with, once again, we're coming up with dates, and it looks like by vote, 23rd, June 23rd may be the date. And it's gonna be half a day. We're gonna meet up in front of the building and zoning department, and we're gonna be on a small bus, and we're gonna tour the city. It's gonna be the county commissioners, guys, county manager, and the people from Wood Place or Wood, who's also coordinating the windshield tour as well.
You said it's the 24th,
23rd.
23rd, what time?
It's gonna be in the morning, about 10 a.m.
Now, what's the intent? What are they, what are you trying to accomplish?
The thing we're trying to accomplish is, do we need to rezone, basically how to see the flow of the city, which the commercial land use, residential land use, any kind of, just taking any kind of feedback of what we can do to better the community.
Oh, I see. Okay.
This is related to those moratorium businesses.
Okay.
I would anticipate that we will visit a lot of convenience stores and maybe some of the dollar stores. The exact locations are going to be determined by Wood, exactly what the tour route would be. But they did ask us for the locations of all those businesses that were listed in the moratorium ordinance. Now, you'll recall that most of those uses aren't, that type of use is not even in the county. Most of them are in the city. We don't have any vape shops, we don't have smoke shops, we don't have tattoo parlors, et cetera. There's a couple more that we don't have in the unincorporated area. But
That's some barrels. Okay.
It's on the 23rd, at what time?
23rd at 10 o'clock.
well, this is a by invitation only, so
We're not invited.
we are working our way down the list.
So, it may go to.
No, the bus isn't big enough to take everybody.
I don't wanna go. So,
Wow.
well, Joel does.
As long as they know dogs.
Keenan has attempted to contact the individuals, and then if there are some fallbacks, somebody might get a phone call.
Okay. Well, in that event, call me.
I'm still waiting for the gentleman from Interfor to call us to come out there and eat.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. The tour, weren't we gonna get a tour?
We're-
of
Yeah.
The whole spiel and
Yeah.
operation, yeah.
All right, anything else?
Don't hold your breath.
Mr. Bridges, how much longer you gonna be here?
About a month and a week.
A month and weeks.
All right, so I guess we'll see you next month.
Yes, sir.
All right,
I don't have anything else.
we don't have anything else, then we will adjourn, unless anybody has a problem with that.
You need a motion for that?
No, I just need this
motion.
right here. We're adjourned.
127, since our team ran out.
10 mile quick.
Anybody that makes food? Who's in a band?
Carry it out.
Yes.
It's gonna be down for a year.
Yeah, for a year. Well,
It's gonna be down for at least a year.
What is that?
The bridge on Jeff Davis, 10 Mile Creek, with States